So my name is Sanjana and I'm from Ivy Path. I co-founded Ivy Path with my co-founder Lan, who couldn't be here today because he's traveling. And I think many of you have come here from our Instagram page. It's an initiative that we started to actually help Ivy students from around the world, whether they're in MYP or DP, whether they're shifting from another curriculum to here, to the IB, or whether they are already in the IB and just want more guidance with succeeding in the curriculum and ensuring that they have all the resources and guidance that they can have in order to reach the highest level that they can. And for today's webinar, we have partnered with Tychr, where Ms Sneha, who is a IBDP English Language and Literature. Sorry, just 1 second. I think someone's mic is unmuted. Yeah, who is an English IBDP examiner from Tychr itself, and she has over 5 years of experience as an IBDP teacher and examiner, and she has been very kind to come with us on this webinar today and help us discuss what you can really do to score in English language and literature in the DP. And I'll ask Mr. Arpit to just speak a little bit about Tychr and what the organization is about.
Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome, everyone. And so we have partnered with Ivy Path to help IB students around the world with respect to different subjects regarding the IB curriculum. And what exactly do we do at Tychr is we provide help to the entire IB students worldwide, right from the PYP curriculum till the DP, DP exams. And apart from that, we also provide help with respect to standardized tests like the SAT, ACTs, and APs, and also college consulting. Today, we are here to help you out with whatever areas that you might need help for a subject that is English A, language and literature. And I think Ivy Path and Sneha from our team is going to take it forward now.
Yeah. So guys, what we're going to do is I'm going to share my screen with the presentation. If whenever you're able to see my screen, just let me know in the chat. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, Sanjana, we got a response in the chat. We can see.
Okay, that's perfect. So as I mentioned, this webinar will be, it's a collaboration between Ivy Path and Ms Sneha from Tychr. She's an IBDP examiner and I have recently graduated the IBDP. I was a May 2024 candidate and I took English language and literature at the HL level and I received a 7, which is why I feel like I have certain tips and tricks up my sleeve because I've been in the same boat as you guys. I've been through the 2 years of IBDP. I also did the MYP, so I know what the transition between MYP English and DP English can be like. So with this webinar, we just hope to help provide you guys with a bit more guidance on how you can approach English A language and literature at the DP. So, sorry. Yeah, so in this webinar, this is just a brief of what we'll be covering. Okay, so we're going to just discuss the general language and literature requirements. So now many of you may know this, so it might just be a review for many of you. But for those of you who are currently in the MYP or are in your summer before DP starts, this will be very helpful. So this is especially for you. Then we will really delve deep into and dissect the paper 1 and 2 criterion, because this is something I feel like really helped me achieve a 7 in English, is understanding the criterion and what it expects from me. Then we'll hear from Ms. Sneha, who is an examiner, about what really examiners expect from you when they're grading your paper, right? What is it that examiners look for in a response that gets a 7? And then you'll get I'll just share some tips and tricks that worked for me, as well as some things that I feel like you should keep in mind when you write your paper 1 and 2 respectively. And then, of course, you'll have the opportunity to ask any questions and then get them answered. So we'll be answering all the questions that were asked on Ivy Path's Instagram page as well. And then if you have any more questions that haven't already been answered, there'll be an opportunity for you at the very end to put your questions in the chat as well. So just to get started, these are general requirements of English language and literature. I won't spend too long on this. We'll just go over it very quickly. So the minimum number of texts required are 4 literary text for the standard level and 6 literary texts for the HL level. Now, there are also various non-literary texts that you will cover and various bodies of work. This is especially important for your IO that you'll cover throughout your DP. There's no specific number of how many non-literary texts you should cover, but it should be plenty enough for you to prepare for paper 1. Then you have your externally graded components, which is paper 1 and 2. Now for SL paper 1, you will have one unseen guided textual analysis where you have one non-literary text that has been provided to you and it's been unseen. So it's something completely new. It's not something you've studied prior and you will have to analyze it on the spot. Now, the only difference between SL and HL paper 1 is that HL students will have 2 unseen guided texts, and they'll have to attempt both of them. Whereas SL students will have the opportunity to choose between which text suits them better or which text they know more about and then attempt that text. And then paper 2 is the exact same for SL and HL, where you have to do a comparative analysis of 2 literary works that you have studied throughout your DP course. And then the other components are your HLSA and your internal oral. Now, these components we're not going to cover in this webinar because it's too vast of a topic to cover all of it in one webinar. But something that you have to keep in mind is you cannot double dip with your texts. What that means is the literary text that you choose for your paper 2, those cannot be repeated for your IO. You must choose a different literary text for your IO. And if you're an HL student, then you cannot choose the same text as your IO and your paper 2 for your HLSA. If it is at all found that you have double dip with your text in any of these 3 components or 2 components, then it really puts your diploma at risk. So that's something you have to avoid at all costs. And here are just again some general requirements for English language and literature. The main difference between English HL and SL is that the weightages for the components are very different because the HL have something called the HL essay, which is another assessment component which the SL students don't have. So the weightage is something that you should keep in mind when you're preparing, because for SL students, their paper 1, paper 2, and IO are the only 3 assessment components. So they all of them, quite frankly, have a lot of weightage, whereas HL students have the HL essay as well. So that's kind of like an extra aspect for them to score higher. And then there are also some key features of the curriculum and assessment models that are included here. It's not something that you necessarily need to know, but it is in the guide provided by the IB. So it's maybe something you can refer back to later on. And now we'll start with the main gist of the webinar, which is paper 1. So paper 1 has 4 criteria. It is criterion A, B, C, D. Each are worth 5 marks, and they total to sorry, there's been an error over here. It's total 20 marks. And now here are the level descriptors. This is for criterion A. So now the 4 criterions in paper 1, each one of them have a level descriptor that is provided by the IB. Now this is in the IB guide. If you go through the guide, you'll find this in the assessment column. And what these level descriptors do is they tell us as students and also examiners what exactly the IB is expecting from the student when they want a level 7 response, right? So now since it's a 20-mark paper 1, each criterion has an equal weightage of 5 marks each. So in order to get 18 out of 20 or 19 out of 20 or 20 out of 20, which is what will get you a 7, you have to really aim to score high in each and every criterion in paper 1, right? So what this level descriptor basically does is it tells me as a student, for example, what I need to do in order to score high in criterion A. Now, criterion A is understanding and interpretation. Now, if you look at the this is something that, by the way, guys, I think you should pay a lot of attention to and read very carefully on this slide. Take a couple of minutes, maybe 1-2 minutes, and go through all of them, right? So go through all the different mark bands and what they exactly say, because it's something that will help you gauge where you're at. So if you look at mark band 4, it says the response demonstrates a thorough understanding of the literal meaning of the text. There is convincing interpretation of many implications of the text. And references to the text are relevant and support the candidate's idea. Now, if you compare it to mark band 5, you will see that mark band 4 you only can be allotted a mark band 4 if you show thorough understanding of the literal meaning of the text, right? But mark band 5 has a couple of new words which aren't in other mark bands. Now, that is what really sets you apart from a 6 to a 7 or from a 5 to a 7. right, is these specific criterions, and when you fall short in that. So if you're getting a 4 in criterion A, that can really make a difference between you getting an overall 6 or a 7. So I think Ms. Sneha can add a bit more about what examiners are really looking for when they look at the mark band 5 and what they expect from students.
Yeah, thank you, Sanjana, for such a detailed explanation. Can we go to this slide? Okay. Hello, everyone. Sanjana has already introduced me. Before examiner, I'm a teacher at heart. So the first thing that you should always do when you're looking at the paper 1 text, just a quick reiteration, paper 1 is your unseen guided textual analysis. Now, what does unseen mean in this name of the paper? Unseen means that the text you have not done in the class, that specific text. However, that text type or the body of work you will be covering in your classrooms, right? The skill set are already being explained, discussed in the class. Okay, so therefore it's maybe the particular text type that you're getting that is not exactly done, and therefore it's an unseen guided textual analysis. The most healthy and the most effective practice that you should do is looking at the level descriptor, especially the top band descriptor, as Sanjana mentioned. And we're going to dissect it. We're going to unpack some of the key words of the top band descriptor. If I may request all of you to just read the Mark 5 descriptor, which says, the response demonstrates a thorough and perceptive understanding of the literal meaning of the text. There is a convincing, it's a good idea that you sit with the hard copy of the mark scheme and underline all these key points, the operative terms like convincing, insightful. And if you notice carefully, these are the terms which you will not find in other marks descriptor. So you'll not find convincing and insightful in Mark 4 band, right? So you can underline all of that, highlight it in your copy of the mark scheme, the first step that you can do. Then larger implications is another key word, which is very, very important, along with subtleties of the text. I'm going to talk about it in detail about each of these terms. References to the text are well chosen and effectively support the candidate's ideas. Now, when we come as examiner in the scenario, we look for all these traits in your answers that you have written. So we look for whether the understanding is perceptive or not, to what extent the understanding is insightful or not, where are the implications, where are the complex ideas that the text present, and how much have you been able to cover it in your answer, how many and how meaty are your references to the text that you have chosen. So let's try to look at each of these terms. We'll try to unpack it for you. The first word is understanding, because that's the name of the criterion also. Understanding. What exactly the examiners are looking for in understanding. So understanding is, of course, the literal meaning of the text. What is the most explicit idea that the text is presenting? And this, I'm sorry, somebody needs to hold. Yeah, so sorry. Yeah. So understanding is the literal meaning of the text and the situation of the extract, which includes its basic elements, maybe the setting, the cultural context. If you can see a glaring cultural context which is embedded in the text, just annotate it. SL students, it's your 1 hour, 15 minutes paper. That means you get a religious, dedicated 10 to 12 minutes of annotation. Please annotate on all these lines that we're discussing. You can take down notes also. And we will give you this presentation also, right? Sanjana, we'll be putting up this presentation
that's right,
somewhere?
yes.
Okay, great. Okay,
That's
so the literal meaning of the text are those glaring ideas that the text immediately throws at you. It could be character, physical setting, cultural context, conflict, some kind of dominant feelings that it evoke in you when you see the text, right? Then consider the form also. What is the text type? It's an advertisement, it's an infographic, it's a magazine cover, it's an opinion column. What is it actually? Then and also in paper 1, just below the question or just above the question, somewhere around that space, you'll see in italics, IB specifically mentioned the year of publication. And there's a reason that it mentions that. That means it contextualizes the text for you. please keep a note of it, highlight it again. Then infer the meanings that is again explicitly presented or self-evident. So you have to have a very, very thorough analysis of the text and the packaging of it. That's what understanding means. The second word is implications. Implications is just the implicit meanings, the embedded meanings, the layered meanings, the meanings that are not very evident or apparent. And that you need to annotate it further, you need to look for it, you need to sometimes draw it from the explicit connotations also that the text is trying to present. All right, references to the text. Okay, references to the text is how are you incorporating some phrases or some visual elements, because in paper one you get text which are visually enhanced also. So are you commenting the claim that you're making, are you providing an evidence for it or not, are you providing some kind of example from the text which is given or not? So try to do that also. The second keyword in this criteria is, the criteria doesn't stop with understanding. The criteria also get into the interpretation. And your students, it's a fine blend of understanding and interpretation. Interpretation is again understanding the complex ideas, the sometimes the ambiguous ideas also. Let's say if it's an advertisement where maybe a man with a very sturdy expression is holding a baby. What is it trying to convey? It is trying to convey, I'm just giving a very, very raw example at this point of time. Probably it is trying to convey the subverted gender roles, or the a question on the conventional gender roles. What does the expression trying to say? So it's a very solemn expression that the man has on the text. What is it trying to convey? So understand the complex ideas, note it down. Sometimes we feel just we see it, but we know it, but we need to draw associations. Please note it down. Again, 1 hour 15 minutes, SL students, 10 to 12 minutes is your religious annotations around all those lines. Anything, Sanjana, you would want to add that you probably did it during your practice time,
Yeah.
or maybe writing exam on those
Yeah,
lines?
so I would say making annotations is definitely important, right?
Yeah.
It's something, it's really like those, those first couple of minutes after you've read the text, just to let it kind of soak in. Because I think in the beginning, when we look at the text, you just have so many ideas, and they're great ideas. But then once you start writing, if you haven't made a plan, you're just going to half serve them. You're not going to do them full justice. So I
Yeah.
think, as Ms. Sneha said, annotations is definitely key. Making a plan is definitely key, right? These are something that's going to guide your entire response.
Yeah.
So again, it's not one size fits all. Maybe you only need 5 minutes to make your plan, jot all your ideas down. Maybe you need 10 minutes, but take that time. 1 hour 15 minutes for SL and 2 hours 15 minutes for HL. It's actually enough time to take 10-15 minutes of planning and still produce a very well written response. And I think, Ms. Sneha, you can maybe clarify this for a lot of students. They ask, is there a specific word limit that examiners are looking for paper one or for paper two?
No
Yeah.
prescribed word limit, and that's actually the intriguing part of it, the exhilarating part of
Mm-hmm.
it also, because
Yeah.
there's no word limit. However, if you look at the top band of each criteria, it
Hmm.
you would have to write a thorough and perceptive understanding of the text, the analysis, and that would only happen when you're following all the top bands. And if even if I were to like urge to give a word limit, for paper one, it should be nowhere less than 1,000 to 1,200 words. You cannot do justice to the text uh, below that word limit. I mean, if you were to write a thorough and perceptive understanding with all the textual features, the graphic literature features that the text presents. So there
Yeah.
is no word limit that we as examiners look for. However, if you just write 3 paragraphs, of course, that's a very compromised answer. So if you were to do
Yeah.
justice and incorporate all the descriptions of the top band, it will invariably reach to a 1,200 to 1,200
Hmm.
decent, sober analysis. Right, Sanjana? I think from your
I
experience, what do
I
you
I
say?
completely, yes, I completely agree. So I've done, of course, many tests in school, and
Yeah,
then I've done my final IB exam in May just
yeah,
now. And I think every time I've written upwards of 1,200 words, and it's not
Yeah.
something that you have to force. You don't have to start and say, oh, I must write over 1,000 words.
Yeah, don't let that
I
play
think,
on your mind, I
yeah,
think. Yeah.
yeah. Because what happens is then sometimes you just write in order to fill up the pages, which is also not something that you should do, right, Ms.
Correct.
Sneha? It's not something that examiners would
No,
like
no,
to
no,
see.
not at all. Not at all.
Yeah,
Not at all.
yeah,
It's a very structured answer that we look for. When I say we, I mean
yes,
examiners here. I represent the examinership of IB here. So yeah. So we look for the structure. We also look for in this criteria how to get that 7, look
yeah,
for subtleties that the text try to offer. There's definitely complex ideas. There's definitely, we as examiners wants the candidates to pay close attention to intricacies that the text offers. Every text that the IB offers over the past years, even in their practice papers, there are certain ideas, the complex ideas, very
yeah,
deliberately infused. Please make sure that because the literal one would come on your face. It's the game between you and those complex ideas that you need to
yeah,
sort of practice and strengthen. All right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I completely agree with that. And so what we've also done is we've put a little key terms section over here, right
Yes.
under the criterion. So what all of you can do is after the webinar, you can always come back to the presentation, look at the key terms. And then this can maybe help you recall our discussion. The meeting recording will also be shared, so you can always come back and watch it. But as Ms. Sneha said, these are the key terms that differentiate, a 4 out of 5 and a 3 out of 5 versus a 5 out of 5 in criterion 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, so we'll move on to criterion B then, Ms. Neha.
Yes, yes, surely, surely.
Okay. Yes, so criterion B, analysis and evaluation. Now, again, same thing over here. Just take a couple of minutes and read the mark band 5, the level descriptor for mark 5, and see the difference between that and level descriptor for mark 4 or 3, right? Again, there are these key terms that just really differentiate what it means to get a 5 out of 5 versus what it means to get a 4 out of 5. So the key terms of here that I'd highlight: convincing analysis, authorial choices, evaluation, and how all of these are shaping the meaning of the text. So I think I'll give the floor to Ms. Neha again.
Yeah, yeah. So, analysis and evaluation, anybody who would like to just share what is your understanding? What is the difference between analysis and evaluation? If anybody wants to go for it. Sanjana, can they unmute and go for it?
They can unmute, yes, definitely.
Yes, yes. Is there anyone? And it's okay. You don't have to be right or wrong at this point of time. We're still figuring it out. Yeah, Manan,
Yes,
thank
there's
you.
someone, yes.
Yeah.
So from my understanding of analysis and evaluation, analysis is when we pick out the literary techniques and break down the text, and evaluation is when we look at the effect of those techniques and how useful they are.
Great, great. So analysis is when you separate and identify the parts of the whole and discuss various possible interrelationships. Is it,
Yes.
Manan? Okay, great. I think there was another hand raised. Sanjana, was it Catherine?
Yeah, it was Catherine, yeah.
Yeah, Catherine. Go for it.
Yeah, so like just mentioned, I think analysis is kind of like considering what the author wanted to convey or suggest, whereas evaluation, you can kind of again consider the effect and how successful the author was in doing so.
Yeah, perfect. So just analysis is definitely, thank you, Manan and Catherine, for those responses. Analysis is yes, to separate and identify the parts of a whole, to discuss the various interrelationships of the features of the text. Now, how can you do this breakdown of the parts of a text? How can you divide on what sections can you divide the text? It can be form. What is the form of the text? Mode, structure, genre, use of language. These are some of the broader, big ideas on which you should just, again, your annotations game in those 10 to 12 minutes for criteria B should be this. Just break down the text. I tell my learners just, maybe do a 4-section kind of a grid or do whatever. Just break it down. Break it down, literal, break it down in your planning sheet. Okay? And evaluation is calculating the importance, as Manan and Catherine rightly added, calculating the importance and value of the author's choices. There you would have to make a choices. You will not stop at just analysis, at just identifying or breaking down the text on those sections. You will also take it one notch higher about which features play a significant role. Is the use of imagery create, let's say, a vivid portrayal or a poignant portrayal of the character or of the setting? Or is the use of pathetic fallacy adding some kind of depth to the text? Put through all these words in use very evaluative adverbs like successfully, effectively. Throw this at the examiner, throw this at us. All right. Successfully, effectively, methodically. Evaluative adverbs. It's a good practice, dear children, to make a sort of repository, a word bank with all these evaluative adverbs. You never know, when you're writing it, it will come to you when you're writing and framing sentences. Okay, right? There's other operative words that I want your attention on. One is textual features and one is broad authorial choices. And children, you can park these two words because these two words would also come in paper 2 criterion B, when we will discuss criterion B there also. Textual features are the features which are embedded in the text, and broad authorial choices are something that you would see happening, it's recurring. So broad authorial choices could be structure, the narrative perspective, the choice of speaker, the setting. Okay. And micro literary features would be imagery, diction, figurative language, symbols. So have a very, very clear understanding. Maybe when you're breaking down the text, you can have another subcategory. Okay, these are the broad authorial choices and these are the micro literary choices. Put it down on the paper. You never know when you're forming your body paragraphs where they would fit into. It's like a puzzle with a lot of pieces. Okay, since paper 1, dear children, is all about non-literary text, so look into the graphic literature elements like images, color, contrast, arrangement, shape, everything, gaze, posture, all these points. Okay. Yeah, anything? Yes, Sanjana, would you want to add something to it? Anything that you particularly observe in was?
Yeah, so I feel like, when you mentioned that you should use evaluative adverbs, I think that's something I definitely did. And it's something that ties into criterion D as well, the use of language, right? So what also you guys need to understand is a lot of these criterions, right? They're not really narrow and straightforward. A lot of them really overlap. So when you write your text, you really need to keep in mind these key terms that Ms. Sneha discussed for sure, right? It's not like you need to memorize them and you need to ensure that you include them in your essay, or it's nothing like that. But it's something that you should keep in mind when your examiner reads your paper. Um, they shouldn't have to struggle to find the implicit meaning, or they shouldn't have to struggle to find the connection. They shouldn't have to struggle to see, is the argument convincing, right? That's something, it's something that should be very obvious in your essay. So I think that's something which Sneha would agree with, is like, the impression that the examiner should get is that, okay, that your essay it's well endowed, that everything is in there, right? It's evaluative, is analytical. It hasn't just stopped at the explanation point. It's gone beyond. It's looked at the further implications of authorial choices. It's looked at the impact on readers, or why the author has chosen to done so, and what impact does it actually have on the reader, and how this affects how this impacts how the author is conveying his or her message. So that's something you should keep in mind when you're trying to attain that 5 out of 5 in criterion B.
Yeah, just to add on also here, all these claims that you're making about the effect of these authorial choices, textual features, graphic literature elements, you have to relate it to your guiding question. I think we're forgetting.
Yes.
And again, as an examiner, this is our complaint that some candidates in the flow of writing, they forget that there is a guiding question. And we need to go back. We need to repeat the keywords using synonyms, not the direct words of the question. Do not do a direct picking and lifting, but show explicit connections with your guiding questions. So all these effect, all the claims that you're making, you have to connect it to your GQ, which is your guiding question. All right, Sanjana, anything you want to add here?
Yes. No, I think nothing for criterion B. We will
Yeah,
move on to
yeah.
criterion C now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can see that criterion C is not as heavily worded as criterion A and B, but that doesn't mean it's any less important, right? It's still worth 5 marks, so it's just as important. But I think perhaps this is something that it's kind of like an opportunity, at least from a student's perspective, to kind of score, right? It's something that you can really, you can easily score, much more easily score in criterion C than I would say the other criterions. So if you see the mark band for level 5 is just the presentation of ideas is effectively organized and coherent. The analysis is well focused. So it's very concise but very stifled information. And we have a couple of key terms here: coherent, effectively organized presentation of ideas. So Ms. Sneha, can you talk a little bit about what this exactly means when you're writing a paper 1?
Yes, so you focus is of course it's what we just talked about the GQ. So the
Yes.
examiner wants to see some explicit, definitely explicit connections to the GQ. Also, in your introductory paragraph, whether you're doing paper 1 or you're doing paper 2 or you're writing HLSA, in fact, even in your individual oral also, we examiners obsessed with thesis statement. We need solid thesis statement in your introductory paragraph. Put thesis statement, tell the examiner, okay, these are the broader authorial choices / textual features that I'm gonna explore in my analysis. And this is how, and show the connection also in your thesis statement to the GQ. So that immediately contextualizes your answer, your route that you're going to take to write this, the analysis. Also make thoughtful choices about the order in which you will present your claims. References to the text, analysis, explanation, so that use a lot of transition words when you move from one idea to another idea. Moreover, in addition, to show that it is all unified, it is all packed with one nice layered ribbon. The entire answer is packed and you're not all over the place. This, my dear students, will only come when, again, I am sort of repeating myself, but if you do not spend those first 10 to 12 minutes of planning all of this, you need to plan it. The more planning you done, the more easy the remaining minutes, maybe whatever 1 hour or whatever you're left with in writing the answer. SL students and HL students, you have to do this process twice because you're writing 2 unseen guided textual analysis. So have clarity. What is your first introductory? Start always with a hook, strong hook about what is the text trying to convey, what is the literal meaning, what is the context of the text, is there any gender societal idea that the text is trying to promote or challenge or question or implore you to think on it. Start with a hook, then come about the what is the text type about. So these are, there are components of introductory paragraph also. We can have a chat on that also later. So have a very structured introductory paragraph, then come to the body paragraph. What are you going to do in your body paragraph? What is the point? What is the quote? Everything. Use transition words also. Examiners likes to see a very coherent and unified answer, which is, and draw explicit connections to the GQ. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Ms. Neha has pretty much covered everything. Just one thing I would like to add is
please.
when we talk about making the plan, for SL students, you guys have quite a bit of time, but for HL students, remember you have 2 hours 15 minutes for both the texts. So that roughly gives you 1 hour 7 minutes to spend on one respective text at a time. And this 1 hour 7 minutes will include making the plan and writing the entire response and finishing it. So that's something that you need to keep in mind if you are an HL student. And that's why practicing HL papers, full length HL papers, is something that will really help you. So it's not doing like maybe 1 paper a week, but 1 or 2 papers a month. And then, so by the time that whatever your exams are, when your final exam is, by the time that the exam comes, maybe in November or in May, you're really prepared. You're not worried like, oh, I'm only used to writing SL length papers, because that's something that's an issue I faced, because in my school we only practiced SL full length papers. So when the HL full length paper I had to write the HL full length paper in the May 24 exam. I feel like I had to really struggle with time. It's something I still made up for the time, and it all ended well since I got a 7, but I did struggle. So I think that can be a pitfall that many students face. So that's just something I wanted to add.
Just to add
Okay.
on to what Sanjana mentioned
Mm.
here, paper one students is usually designed is one text is textually loaded. So one
Yeah.
text could be infographic, magazine cover, advertisement, which has more of textual elements. And the second text would be one text would be visually rich, which is infographic, print advertisement, and magazine cover. The second text would be textually loaded, textually heavy, just opinion columns, speech,
Yeah.
article, all of that. So with HL students, because you would have to attempt both. So you need both these skills, the conventions of these, all these kind of text you need to be ready with. However, with SL students, do not fall into the trap. Sometimes what happens is that the visually enhanced text is slightly more nuanced than the textually enhanced text. So my suggestion is that practice as many texts as you can throughout your DP course. You never know what kind of text, even if it is visually loaded or textually heavy, what will come at your step.
Yeah. And just another piece of advice for SL students is don't spend too long on choosing your text, because you feel like you have the choice to choose. So you might, just overthink and go into a spiral about, oh, is this text better? Is that text better? Be very confident with your choices. Be confident in yourself. Just choose the text, and then your rest of the time is much more useful in making the plan and writing your response, and rather than choosing the text. And before we move on to criterion B, someone has asked in chat, do you annotate on question paper or answer paper? So you annotate on the question paper, but you can use an answer booklet to make your plan or write down rough ideas. But one thing you have to ensure is you cross it out. So at the end of the examination, your rough ideas, your plan, if they are on the answer sheet, they have to be crossed out, which tells the examiner that you don't grade this.
Yeah, and also from the examiner's side, we know that there's some kind of ideation happens, but that's a healthy practice that Sanjana has talked about. If you don't want to, if you don't want to cross it out, you can just write it also not to be assessed like that.
Yes.
So you can make a declaration kind of a thing. So
yeah. And I believe you're also more than free to write anything and annotate on your question paper itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving on to criterion D. So again, not as text heavy as A and B, but still as important, still worth 5 marks. It's about language. This is something I spoke about when we were discussing criterion B that time. So just give me a second. I think someone's in the waiting room. Sorry, just 1 second. Yeah. So key terms over here: effective, precise, varied, accurate. This is all about the kind of language that you use. The register, which is another keyword that I think many of you may not be aware of, and a language that is appropriate to the task. So I think something that you have to keep in mind is that this is an academic essay that you're writing.
Yes.
It is an academic task. It's not, it's not, the IB doesn't say that is necessarily formal, but it does need a formal tone to it. You can't say something like, so guys, today I'm writing, of course, none of that. Always a good idea, I think, to maintain a third person point of view language. So instead of saying you or I, it's always better to use third person. So where you're being indirect, you're not being direct, you're not directly saying the author has done this, so we feel like, or the author has done this, so we understand. Instead of that, you use indirect language. The author has done that, so the readers understand, or the audience is able to perceive, like that. Yes, Ms. Sneha.
Yeah, I think you covered most of it. So register, as I will just elaborate on register, because this is something that we struggle when it comes to this criteria. One is register. Register is the what Sanjana mentioned. It's the formality of your writing style. It's an academic paper that you're writing. It's an examination paper you're writing. So you cannot have conversational fillers, as she pointed out. You cannot have sort of, all of that. The other thing that we look for is a varied language. Now, language we still get. From candidates. The vocabulary is more or less decent. There are enough careful, conscious use of synonyms all over the paper. However, we also look for varied in sentence construction, sentence structure. So do not just stick to just simple sentences. Have complex compound sentences. Have sentences that starts with verb plus ing. Having said that, comma, the readers having presented the subverted gender ideas, the advertisement prompts the readers to further take an action. So what have you done? You have included one sentence which starts with verb plus ing. So not just variety in your language, in your vocabulary, but also in your sentence structures is something that we look for. And at the end of the day, it's a English paper, it's a language paper. So your grammar, punctuation, spellings should be accurate. There should not be too many glaring mistakes out there. Yeah. Sanjana, you want to add something?
Something to point out is this is English language and literature. So your spelling, if you have a lot of spelling mistakes, I think it does affect how your response is graded. Yeah. So that's something that you guys have to keep in mind. There can be very silly errors such as quiet and quiet, but if you should just avoid them. 1 or 2 spelling errors, as long as they don't hinder the meaning of the sentence, I don't think examiners would actually care that much. But
1 or 2 we kind of ignore.
Yeah, but I think repetitive spelling errors is something that you should definitely avoid. Yes.
If it becomes too glaring on our face, then of course we would have to dunk you in criteria D.
Yes. Okay, I think we're done with criterion D.
Yeah.
So now this slide is basically just to So this slide is basically just to answer your question, because this is something that students ask us a lot, is how do you gauge yourself if you have reached the highest level descriptors? So when you're writing your exam, or when you're writing your paper, your test, whatever it is, how do you judge for yourself? Have I done everything I need to for criterion A, B, C, D? So these are a couple of questions. So this is provided by the IB itself. So this is on the IB guide, but I've just collated it and put it on this slide so it's easier for you guys to access. These are a couple of questions provided by the IB, which also I believe the examiners would be referring to when they're grading. So this is something that's very good to keep in mind. Yeah.
Actually, this is taken from the guide actually, as Sanjana mentioned, and treat this as a checklist for yourself when you're doing those practice papers also. In criteria B, how much have you demonstrated in understanding? How much is your answer organized? Have you analyzed and evaluated the textual features and the broader analysis? Is your language varied, accurate? The register is there, the voice is there. So take it as a checklist for you. Put it somewhere on your work desk or anywhere. And this is the same document that is given to us also as examiners to look for all those requirements. Yeah.
Yeah, as Ms. Sneha said, since examiners use this document, they're actually using this to grade your paper. And I feel like this is something that has definitely facilitated me getting a 7 in English HL, is understanding the criterion, because then you understand what the examiner is looking for and you know exactly what to provide. And what you're doing is you're bridging the gap between the students' work and the examiner's expectations, right? And when you bridge that gap, you're doing everything you need to do. And that's sort of how you go on the path to reaching the highest level descriptors possible. So this slide is something that you should definitely go over. And now moving on to paper 2. Paper 2, again, you have 4 criterion A, B, C, D. You will notice only criterion A has a different component, but B, C, and D are more or less the same. Now, over here, the weightage for criterions is not the same. Criterion A and B are 10 marks each, so they have higher weightage. And criterion C and D, which is focus on organization and language, are only 5 marks each. So you have a total of 30 marks. Regardless of HL/SL, it's 30 marks, and both the levels have 1 hour 45 minutes to do the paper. So now I will go to criterion A, knowledge, understanding, and interpretation. Now, I think the difference over here is in paper 1, it's only understanding and interpretation, but then for paper 2, it's knowledge, understanding, interpretation. So now we'll look at what this addition of the word knowledge really means for paper 2. you'll see some key terms over here: interpretation, implications, persuasion, comparative study, because remember, you are comparing and contrasting two literary texts, only two, not more, not less, that you have already studied in your DP course, right? And relation to the question. Now, in paper one, there is a guiding question, but you always have the choice to tweak it, or you always have the choice to change it. Now, that's not something you can do in paper two. You have to use the question that has been given. And the most important thing over here is choosing the question that is the most relevant to your text. For example, if both of your texts, they tackle love and relationships and romance, and you've picked a question that has nothing to do with it. If the question has something to do with how death is explored in the text, and there is no death in both of your texts, there's nothing you'd be able to write about. And even if you write a response, that's good, but it doesn't actually meet the expectations of the question. There's barely anything you can actually score for it. So choosing the relevant right question is important, and then relating your analysis to the question is the second, and again, a very important step. Ms. Sneha?
Yeah. Just a quick, I think we Sanjana did briefly touch on that part. Paper one, you definitely get a guiding question, children. IB also tells you, openly invites you to tweak the question and answer it. My suggestion, now the teacher is speaking, my suggestion, never do that. Never do that. I don't know, Sanjana, probably you and I can differ here. Did you ever tweak the question that IB has given?
Never. I've never tweaked any question. I would also suggest don't do it.
Do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even if it's a practice paper, whether it be the final IB exam, do not tweak it. Stick with the question. In the long run, trust me, it will benefit you more. Sticking with the question will benefit you more. Yeah.
So show your student agency somewhere else. IB will give you a lot of opportunities, but you don't have the bandwidth to do that in 1 hour and 15 minutes or whatever. You just want to focus and annotate and get that done, right?
Yes.
Okay. So keeping that aside, paper two is this session. I got a chance to mark paper two. So interestingly, the heart of this paper or the heart of this essay is to compare and contrast. My dear children, there are two words to it: compare and contrast. And nowhere you will forget these two are equally important. Compare, that means finding out the similarities, and contrast, differences. Right, Sanjana?
Yes, correct.
All this in relation to the prompt. There are 4 prompts that IB gives you in paper 2. These are very broad questions. If I want to tell you the psyche of behind this IB paper 2 questions, one question would be on themes, one question would be on characters, one question would be on a popular saying of something which is very prevalent in literature, like the motifs or the relationships, and one would be on the broader writer's style and intent, what kind of authorial choices that the writer has used. These questions are designed that they can be applied to any literary works. Okay, but you would come across that maybe 1 out of the 4 prompts probably would not apply to the text that you have studied. Like in TZ1, one of the question was, to what extent myths and legends have been portrayed in the 2 works you have studied? Okay, Shreya is asking a question. Should I answer it right now, Sanjana, or later?
Yeah, and you can answer it right now. It's okay.
Yeah, she's asking, can you repeat the 4 prompt style? So one is theme, Shreya. One is based on theme. One is based on characters, character arc, interpersonal relationships. I mean, these are not very tight recommendations, but this, as IB teacher, as IB examiner, is what I have observed. And that's how I boil it down for my students also, okay? So these are not never documented by IB anywhere, but this is purely based on my experience, and it's pretty much close to what IB has been doing. So theme, characters, interpersonal relationship. The third one, or no, in no particular order, the third kind of prompt would be some literary saying or motif that is prevalent across the literature circles, and the fourth one could be on writers' overall intent and writing style. Okay, so it's perfectly fine, children, if 1 out of the 4 prompts does not apply to your chosen text. Like this year in TZ1, I was just discussing that the question was, to what extent myths and legends have been used in the works that you have studied? Now, not necessarily that the works and the literary works you have picked up would have something related to myths and legends. It's fine. You still have 3 prompts, so it's designed on those grounds also. Um, uh, yeah. So the key terms that you would have to look into is interpretation, implications, and of course, compare and contrast. As I was saying, the heart of this essay is compare and contrast and striking a healthy balance between the two in relation to the question. What examiners look for is, we want the candidate to have some kind of flexible thinking, and we want the students to consider both the works in new and enlightening ways, in ways that the text have not been perceived yet. I know it might sound a little intimidating, a little, I mean, what's going on and stuff, but when you are doing those texts for paper 2, when you're practicing, when you're annotating literature, this is a different ball game altogether. So the key to crack this paper is to have very, very detailed notes. Your OneDrive is a savior for you. You make tabular notes. That's what I had asked my students to do here at Tychr also, that to make notes in the format of, the tabular format. Let's say I've taken a text like A Streetcar Named Desire, then the setting, the point of view, the characters, and some students, though it's not necessary to memorize quotes for this paper, but some students have also picked up certain important phrases, certain important quotes, and put it right there. But have those detailed notes ready with you. This will help you. Okay. And use the question, that whichever question you are picking up, again, look at the question and highlight the operative words of the question and try to unpack them. It's a 1 hour 45 minutes paper. It's a 1 hour 45 minutes paper. That means we as an examiners have huge expectations from candidates, if I have to be brutally honest with all of you, right, with paper 2. Also, 1 hour 45 minutes paper, you're dealing with 2 literary texts, you are comparing and contrasting both the works in relation to the question. So there's a lot that you're doing, we agree. However, we are giving you a lot of time. It's close to almost 2 hours that you're getting. So you better get this done in the most fantastic way that you can do. Okay. Now, coming back to the knowledge part of the band descriptor, is the knowledge of a work is, you should show the knowledge of the work by recalling details. Now, these details could be plot, characters, conflicts, setting, use of language. Or if it is a drama text, then talk about the soliloquies. If it's a Shakespearean work, soliloquies, asides. Have your notes ready. I'm talking about the preparation part of it. Okay. Style, era, in which era it is written. All these details you should know about the text. You never know which detail will fit into as per the prompt that you're picking up. Okay. Right? Interpretation would mean, again, the implicit meaning, the complex meaning. Implications would, and how you deal with those complex meanings, how you deal with those ambiguities that the text would present. Please remember, children, it's a literature paper. It would have tension. It would have some literary nuances that the text is trying to talk about, probably about identity, probably about finding yourself, self-discovery. Have all those put in your analysis. Do not give a superficial summary paraphrase. We know the plot. We know what happens in the namesake. We know what happens in ASND. Everybody has an access to wiki page. So do not give a summary. Do not give a summary. Understand, pick up the complex ideas and unpack it to show your interpretation. That's what it means, interpretation, right? And then compare and contrast. I am reiterating it, that it has to be a healthy balance both. Usually students tend to compare more than contrast. That means identifying similarities still comes naturally to you, but identifying differences is also equally important, especially when it is 2 different genres that you are dealing with. For example, one could be a drama text, the other could be a graphic novel. Okay, so when you have these two varied type of text, the expectations of the examiner is skyrocket. That now I want this candidate to not just cite the differences between the plot, but also of the text type. Because these are two different text types. Drama is a different text, different experience. Graphic novel is a different experience, right? And everything, children, all the IB assessment components have an obsession with the guiding question. Every paper has a guiding question. Individual oral, you have global issue. Everything you have to tie it back to your GQ, the prompt that you're picking up. Okay, Sanjana, anything that you want to add?
No, I think you've pretty much covered everything, but I do want to reiterate something you said is the notes part is definitely very important.
Yeah.
See, just having vast, detailed, and accurate knowledge about your text is something that will just, aid you through your paper two. Without that, your paper two, no matter how great your analysis is, if you're lacking in the knowledge, it will always fall short, right? So you need the context of production, context of reception, the author, his or her writing style, how it is impacted, or how it has been highlighted in the text, the impact it has on the plot, on the impact on reader, how it helps the author convey the message. All of it all boils down to having knowledge of the text. So your notes should be brilliant. Your notes should be something that you can always refer back to, and you just, it should be sort of like it's your own little Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And like I think Ms Sneha mentioned, just having summaries is not enough. Your notes have
Not
to
at
be
all.
detailed, analytical. They need to be insightful. They need to have your
Exactly.
own personal, subjective insight. So that's something you have to keep
Yes.
in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
Mantras. Yeah.
I get this question quite often that, ma'am, how do we move from a good essay to excellent essay? Now,
Yeah.
of course, and I'm sure that would be one of the questions which is playing on most of your mind, right? At this point of time, there's definitely a very thin line. And also please understand, children, English A Lang and Late is a process. It's a
Yeah.
process. This curriculum is a process. I mean, it needs scaffolding task. It needs consistent efforts. You will not ace it in just one go. So, but we can give you some tips and tricks here also, how to move from a good to excellent essay. What Sanjana was saying, that it has to be more than summary. So when you're making notes, first, both the text you would have to read multiple times. If not read, then look at, even if you're not reading it multiple times, the first reading that you do, make sure that your annotations, your notes are so rich and meaty that it should suffice another level of reading. It should replace another level of reading the literary text. Then clear references. If you're working on OneDrive, that's a fantastic platform to work on. You can categorize so many things. You can color code the references. You can color code the plot line, the structure, where the character arc happens, where the tension reaches the crescendo, and all of that. So have all these asserted interpretations of the text chalked out in your notes. Okay, that's the only way that you can move from good to excellent knowledge. As I said, examiners look for some flexible thinking from the candidates, something which is not being discussed earlier. So that only happens because, as I said, it's a process. That only happens when you make such notes, when you are persistently at it. Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll move on to criterion B here. Okay, analysis and evaluation. So we have a couple of key terms here: convincing analysis, evaluation, textual features. This is something again that we had in paper one. Authorial choices, a good compare and contrast, and evaluation. So
Yeah.
something that Ms. Sneha had mentioned is your compare and contrast, it has to be balanced. You can't overdo the comparisons, and you can't overdo the contrast, right?
Yeah.
There has to be a balance. It doesn't necessarily mean you need 4 points of compare and 4 points of contrast. You can have 3 points of compare and 4 points of contrast, but you can't have 2 points of compare and 4 points of contrast, right? Because that's not balanced. It's just completely off then. Because you're overdoing one aspect and you're underdoing the other aspect. Because comparison and contrast, they have equal weightages in paper one, right? Only comparing is not going to get you anything, and only contrasting is not going to get you anything. And again, an important note to make of here is there is very good comparison and contrast of the author's choices in the work selected. So you're not comparing and contrasting the plot or you're not comparing and contrasting the characters. You're comparing and contrasting the author's choices. And I think this is where many students make a mistake, is they think they're comparing and contrasting, like the face value of the text. They take it very literally, comparison and contrast within the text. That's not what it's about. It's about the authorial choices. It's about the literary elements and literary devices that may be in the text, and how do they compare and contrast. And that's what your paper 2 is really supposed to be about. It's not about the face value of your text. You really need to go much deeper than that. I think Ms. Sneha can agree with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So under no circumstances, any examiner is looking for summary, as I've already mentioned. We're not looking for summary, okay? And as Sanjana rightly pointed out, the compare and contrast for this particular criteria is about the writer's choices, the writer's intent, the writer's style. So how probably symbolism is used in A Streetcar Named Desire, and how symbolism is used by Ibsen in Doll's House. So that is something, if you are covering in your analysis, not the plot line. We know the plot line, we know the face of both the text, we don't need that. But how the setting is different, or how the setting is similar, or if it's a Persepolis, which is a graphic novel, and if it's a drama text, that make sure that you have the graphic novel conventions also discussed. And that's the difference. So you're ready with one major difference between the two texts. So you don't have to annotate it further, because one is your graphic novel, the other is your drama text. So of course the authorial choices will differ. Of course the authorial choices will be vast and will be contrasted in that manner. Okay, but make sure that if the text that you have chosen to get a higher mark in this criteria, if your texts that you have chosen are of different literary genres, as I said, one is graphic novel, one is drama, that means you must discuss the conventions, specific conventions of graphic novel, which could be graphic weight, the panels, the colors, the expression, right? And drama also has certain specific techniques which are not a part of prose. So your soliloquies, if it's a plastic theater, the stage directions, the asides, the monologues, all of that. Make sure that you put it right there. Examiners do look for form-specific authorial choices. And how are you comparing and contrasting it? The rest of it, textual features, it's the same. These are the aspects of the work that enhance the reading experience. Like if there is interior monologue, there is linguistic features such as rhetoric or sentence structure of a particular line. Broader authorial choices are embedded throughout the work, as we discussed, the point of view, the style, the setting, the characters, all of that. Okay. Analysis, I think we've already discussed. It's the same one. Analysis and evaluation is the same one.
Yeah, as Ms. Sneha said again, while you do your compare and contrast, you have to go beyond the explanation point, right? You have to be insightful. You have to talk about the implications. You have to identify the implications, and then always link it back to your guiding question. That's something that's extremely important in paper 2, just as it's important in paper 1.
Yeah.
I'll move on to criterion C now. So criterion C, in paper 2, criterion C and D only worth 5 marks each, but still very important.
Very
Key terms over here, clear, sustained focus, because your paper 2 response is a lot longer than your paper 1. So I think it's easier for students to kind of lose focus and lose their track. That's something that can very easily happen for students. So sustained focus. Every body paragraph should have the larger idea that you're discussing in your body paragraph should be extremely relevant to your question. You shouldn't be talking about something that's relevant maybe to your text, and it may be a valid point for compare and contrast, but it can also be completely irrelevant to the guiding question. So that's not a case that you ever want to be in. So sustained focus should definitely be there. Balance, like I discussed, do not overdo comparisons or contrast. There should be a balance between the two. That's something you have to keep in mind. Logical and cogent manner. So your essay, again, because it's a very long response, for an examiner, when they're reading your text, there should be a logical flow, right? You shouldn't go from maybe a textual feature and directly jump. You shouldn't jump from a textual feature when you're comparing something. In the same body paragraph, you start talking about the contrast, right? That's not a very logical flow. So
Hmm.
you have 1 hour 45 minutes. So really take the first 10-15 minutes to plan out your body paragraphs. And you have to really ask yourself, does this logically make sense? Is it cohesive? Or am I just jumping around the blocks over here? Because this is worth 5 marks, and the examiner will be able to gauge whether you have a logical flow or not. Is it cohesive or not?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely, Sanjana, absolutely. As you mentioned that this, because it is an overwhelming, intimidating task. Let's just say it out there, right? Let's just make peace with it. Okay. However, it's very tempting that you might, in the process of writing it, you might get into the summary part of it. You
Yeah.
might get into just the plot sequencing. This happens, that happens, this happens, that happens. We don't need it. So you have to, when you're practicing, when you're preparing for paper 2, this is something that you have to be very, very mindful about, very conscious about, that nowhere I'm getting into the summary part of it. Therefore, again, 1 hour 45 minutes, you need proper planning of it. How are you going to do about it? And the more background work you have done for the text that you would like to, you freeze your text at the end of your diploma program. You know that these are the 2 texts that I have not done my HLSA, I have not done my IO on these texts. Therefore, I'm left with these 2 texts for my paper 2. So the more background work you have done, the notes that we both have been talking about, it will come handy when it comes to organizing and making your answer very, very focused to your chosen prompt. So make sure you have a proper solid introductory paragraph, you have a thesis statement, then you have a strong hook. Examiners like a good nice hook, because here it's a literature paper, so we also surrender. We are into reading long literature essays, but those essays should be analytical in nature, as Sanjana pointed out. Those essays should retain the spirit of compare and contrast of the authorial choices. Nowhere it's a summary. So have a very proper focus planning in the body paragraphs. Be very clear what is your topic's intents are. We kind of give a lot of templates, a lot of graphic organizers when we prepare the students for paper 2, because it's a long answer, it's a lengthy answer. So we kind of give a broader route map, and then we try to break it down in short bit-sized module task, also writing task, something that you can also do to make sure that your answer is balanced, which is it has both similarities and differences. Nowhere you lose that grip. The minute you lose that grip, it falls apart. It might carry 5 marks, but let me tell you an insider story. When we are correcting paper 2 as examiners, this is the criteria which actually plays on our mind the most. Is it focused? Is it organized? Is it balanced? Is it methodical? And all of that. Okay.
Yeah. And just one more thing I'd like to just add over here. When we talk about balance, it's not just the balance between the compare and contrast, but also balance of the treatment of the 2 texts. You'll see something over here in the mark 5 band. Treatment of the works is well balanced. What that means is you have given enough focus and enough attention and enough, just pretty much like essay time to both of your texts. It's not like one text should be more heavily presented than the other text, because it is a comparative analysis and both the texts are equally important. It's not like one is more important than the other. Even if you show excellent knowledge in one but only substandard knowledge in the other, you're not going to score a very high grade. So the treatment of the works and the comparison and contrast should both be balanced.
And I would also suggest that something that we do here at Teacher with our students is that we kind of, if not, because in the middle of your DP1, we try to introduce paper 2, and it's a good practice that we do is that even if we don't expect the students to write a full lengthy paper 2 answer, at least write, let's say 4 to 5 paragraphs to get into in the mannerism of compare and contrast, in just looking at how certain features of the text are similar, certain features of the text are different. At least get into the writing part. So something that you can also do, children, is to somewhere in the middle of your DP1 or towards the end of your DP1, start practicing paper 2. Do not solely rely on your second year of diploma program to ace paper 2, because there's a lot that you have to do in paper 2.
Yeah, completely
Right?
agree.
Yeah.
And now the last criterion for paper 2, and also the last criterion for this webinar altogether. Criterion D, again, it is language, and again, it's only 5 marks. Key terms here: effective, accurate, register, appropriate, carefully chosen. Very similar to paper 1. There's not something, if it's not anything much different than paper 1, if I'm being very honest. Language is very clear, effective, carefully chosen, precise, with a high degree of accuracy in grammar. So again, grammatical mistakes and spelling errors are not something that there's much space for, because it's a language and literature course. Vocabulary and sentence construction should be very well formed. Again, because there are longer responses, you know, in the flow, you can end up having sentences that are 2-3 lines long, or maybe even 4 lines long, just because you're in the flow. But you have to be you have to keep in mind that there's an examiner that's going to be reading this. That examiner doesn't know you. The examiner may not have read one of the texts, may not have read either of the texts, right? They might be introduced to the text for the first time through your essay. That's something you have to keep in mind. You have to always be very mindful and attentive of how you're writing. Don't write lengthy sentences that are stretched. Write concise sentences that are strife with information. Always use a high degree of accuracy when it comes to your spellings, your grammar. And again, register and style are effective and appropriate to task. So there should be a sense of formality. Don't use conversation style language. Try to stick to third person point of view language. So it's like indirect, passive. You're not being active. You're not saying we as readers or we as the audience. No, just say the audience or the readers perceive so and so. And don't say you, don't use I, avoid using words
Personal
like that.
pronouns.
Yeah, personal pronouns, just avoid personal pronouns altogether. But I think something that Ms. Sneha and I also discussed prior to this webinar is very important to have voice in your essays. Now, you can have voice in the sense that the way that you write, your style of your personal style of writing, the way that you're conveying, the words that you use, the vocabulary, the language, that's what gives your essay the voice. You don't have to use personal pronouns to add voice. You don't have to say, I believe so and so, or I think the author has done this. You don't have to do that. You can still have voice within your essay without using personal pronouns. Just the way that you write, it has to be sophisticated in a way, right? Because you are a DP student, and to get a 7, to get a high grade, right, you are held up to a certain standard in when it comes to language. So there should be a level of sophistication.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree, Sanjana, and most of it you've covered. Just that quick reminder that this is a comparative paper. That means that the language that you are going to sprinkle all over across your paper has to be also consciously comparative in style and in fashion. So when you're writing the introductory paragraph, when you're doing the thesis statement, write in your thesis statement, use words like on the other hand, similarly, in contrast, while, so that you tell the examiner that, look, I know that this is a comparative essay and I know this game, and I'm gonna, you just declare it to the examiner. Also, when you reach your body paragraphs, have the comparative sentence structures. It's a good idea, especially when you start with paper 2. Have certain sentence templates. We have certain sentence templates that you can utilize in your writing style. Sentences like, while a streetcar named Desire exhibits Blanche as a layered character, Ibsen's Doll's House presents Nora initially as a submissive, timid housewife. So what you have done is you have used while this, comma, then this, it becomes a varied sentence structure, also having a comparative style of writing. That's what register means relevant to the task. This task is different for paper 1. Paper 1, you're not comparing and contrasting. Therefore, the use of language or sentence styles would be slightly different. And that's the difference you would have to incorporate in your writing style when you're attempting all these assessment components. Rest of the features are same: clear language, varied language, vocabulary, accuracy, spelling, grammar, punctuation, which we've already discussed, has to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Okay, and the voice one, yes, Sanjana is right. Do not use I, we, all of that. have your own, figure out your own. As I said, it's a process, my dear students. I don't know whether I'm able to make sense of it or not, but I really want you to sort of, after this webinar, reflect a bit that what exactly process is. You have to slowly understand your and figure out your writing style also. Then whatever the IB requirements is, have I used comparative sentences? Have I used evaluative adverbs like that or not? But infuse it with your own writing style without using personal pronouns. You can say audience, readers, one mail for stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah. And I think with this, we're done with the criterions for paper 2. Again, this is a similar slide to what we had for paper 1. It's your question, right? To ask yourself is how do you ask yourself if you have reached the highest level descriptors? These are a couple of questions that you can use to judge your own work after your written responses to see how much knowledge and understanding have I actually demonstrated in my work for Criterion A, for example. This is something you could come back to. Again, it's there in the IB guide. I've just collated it together and put it on the slide. Sorry. Yeah. And then these are just a bit of recap before we end. Key things to keep in mind for paper 1. It's very important to understand and identify literary elements and devices effectively for paper 1. So this is something that you require a lot of prior knowledge for. It's not like because paper 1 is unseen, it's not like you'll just open paper 1 and then you'll be able to identify the literary elements. No, you need to know the literary elements and devices, the textual features beforehand, and only then will you be able to effectively identify them and then analyze and include them in your essay during the paper. This is the kind of work that you have to do beforehand, is just researching literary elements, and it's something you'll do in the class anyways with your teacher and with your peers, but this is something you have to keep in mind. Knowing a vast array of literary elements and devices really opens up many opportunities for you, right? Because sometimes a text can have so many different literary elements, but you don't even recognize it because you don't even know half of them, right? So that's something that's very important. Then your knowledge of non-literary text should be vast. You should study and research different kinds of non-literary texts. So opinion columns, blogs, travel blogs, so any like graphic cartoons, the newspaper articles, online articles, any kind of non-literary articles, that their speeches, all these kind of non-literary articles you should know of, you should research them, you should actively ask your teacher questions about them so that when they do come up in your paper 1, you're not taken aback. Infographic, obviously, you're not taken aback and you're like, I don't really understand this text type. I don't know the conventions of this text type. That shouldn't happen. Then HL students practice full-length HL papers because it's very different than attempting one text. That's something that you have to keep in mind. Attempting 2 texts in 2 hours, 15 minutes is very different than attempting 1 text in 1 hour, 15 minutes. Then also, you should come up with multiple big ideas and then narrow down to 3 or 4 big ideas, the ones that you think are most relevant to your guiding question, the ones that you have enough evidence to talk about, ones that you have enough knowledge to talk about, and then use these to form your body paragraphs. This is something, it's a very personal tip. It's something that's worked very well for me, is having big ideas. And then within these big ideas, you use evidence to make your claims and assertions. Remember to always use evidence to support your claims and assertions. You should not say anything but then not provide evidence for it. Okay, so if it's a travel blog, for example, you can always say, as evinced in lines 21 to 23, whatever it is, and then you make your claim and then you explain it, and you explain its implications and the background of the readers. Evidence is very important for paper 2 as well, where I'll get to that later. And your language should be polished, but don't try to use big words to unnecessarily just fill up space and show the examiner like, oh, my vocabulary is so advanced. That's really not necessary. Your language should be complementing your response, not taking away from it. It shouldn't distract the examiner, like, it shouldn't make the examiner feel like, oh, the usage of these words over here was really unnecessary. That shouldn't happen.
Can I just
And
add
voice,
here? Can I
yeah.
can I just add
Yes,
here
yes,
just
yes,
the
yes.
language part? The language part. Dear students, don't get confused when you come across in IB documents. It's a sophisticated language. By sophisticated language, we don't expect you, as she rightly pointed out, big words. We expect you to write the accurate word and sustain the academic tone throughout. If you can do that, that's the sophistication. We don't need verbos. We don't need
Yeah.
big words that makes no sense, that looks and sounds out of the place. So don't do that, please.
Yeah. And moving on to paper 2, just reiterating again, please know your text thoroughly. The themes, the plot, character development, the setting, other literary elements, you should know them thoroughly. And ensure your comparative analysis is balanced. The comparisons and contrast should be equally given attention to. Both the text should be given equal attention to as well. Don't make up stuff about the plot or the characters, even if it's minute details that you're doing to support your claims or assertions. Don't do it, because there's a very good chance your examiner has already read the text, or they might also try and verify what you've said if it seems out of place. So just completely don't do that. Even if you don't recall something, just don't try to say random things to make up for it. This is why knowing your text thoroughly beforehand is important, is so you don't find yourself in a situation like this. And your 1 hour 45 minutes should be used wisely. It's enough time to write a very good essay. So don't produce a response that is 3 to 4 body paragraphs long, because again, there's no word limit, there's no word count. But if you are writing 3 body paragraphs for a 1 hour 45-minute essay, you are falling short, and you will fall short in criterion A and B for sure, which will ultimately affect your criterion C and D for paper 2.
Right.
Yeah, Ms. Sneha. Yeah. And then
Yeah,
now these
I
are
mean,
just
you've
some
covered
resource.
most.
Yeah. Sorry,
No, I
anything
was
you
just
wanted
saying
to add?
that no. I was just saying that there's no word limit, definitely, but there is word time duration. That means that's also very thoughtfully allocated
Yeah.
for each of the paper. Yeah.
Yeah. And now here are just a couple of resources I've comprised for you. So IB English guys, I think most of you know them. They have a YouTube channel. They're very famous. Then the English A Language and Literature Guide, which you'll find on the IBO website. It's very useful because, again, it's from the horse's mouth. You're hearing from the horse's mouth what exactly the IB wants from you. So it's also what the examiners like Ms. Sneha refer to understand, how do I grade the student? How do I determine if the student deserves a 5, if this response deserves a 6 or a 7? It's this guide that it's kind of like your holy Bible for these 2 years. And again, this applies to all subjects, but specifically for English as well. Then IB Path will also a resource. You can always DM us with your questions. You can ask us for guidance. I have done English HL, and my co-founder Ilan has also done English HL. So we're always there to help you guys and guide you with through these 2 years. Then Revision Village, it's a website, but they require subscriptions for certain things, but they have a lot of free resources as well that you can use. Then In Thinking is a website which requires a school subscription, but if your school has a subscription, ask your DP coordinator and make use of it. They have great resources, and it's actually created by IB examiners. So it's a very good website. Then Lit Learn, which is a website which has a lot of these summaries and chapter reviews for a lot of literary texts. Don't rely on them. Again, make your own notes. Make sure you actually read the text. But it's a good place to go for it if you just want to revise, and maybe you just want to go over certain chapters or certain elements of the plot. And then Tychr, again, which is the organization that Ms. Sneha is a part of. They have a website where there are blogs, there are many resources that you can refer to for help with IBDP English. And then they also offer tutoring services as well. So Ms. Sneha is actually a tutor with Tychr. So that's again another organization that we have found is extremely helpful for IB students. We've had many students that have found teachers tutoring very beneficial, very beneficial, that other services that they've found beneficial. And I think Mr. Arbit can speak a little bit more about it as well.
Right. Thank you so much, Sanjana. Right. First of all, I would like to congratulate Sanjana, for taking out time just 10 days after the IB results. Everyone is traveling and she's taking out time to help IB students around the world. So thank you so much, right? And helping teacher in this endeavor. I would like to thank
My pleasure.
Sneha, right, for speaking her heart out, right? I'm sure she needs a lot of water now, right, after the session. So she has also done an amazing job. And when it comes to teachers, so what we exactly do is we provide tutoring sessions and help with respect to your IOs, IAs, Senate essays, right, for different subjects, not only restricted to English. And we are here to help IB students and make their lives easier, right, in whatever capacity. And we have all the IB examiners for different subjects, right, that are there to help students all around the world. So if there are any further details, I think Sanjana can share the details in the chat.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll share Sadia's number, who's a coordinator at Teacher. If you ever require tuitions for English or any other subject, you can always reach out to them. They have really thoroughly vetted teachers. They have many IB examiners like Ms Sneha herself. So and you can always mention that you have come through IB Path, or you can mention the promo code IB Path 10. And I think Mr. Ahmed will basically give you a discount on all the services that they provide if you've come from IB Path. Again, just to mention, they have very thoroughly vetted teachers, and we've found many students who have benefited from their services and from their tutoring sessions. And what we'll do now is we'll just very quickly answer your questions that you've submitted on Instagram, and also some of the questions that are in the chat. What I'll do is I'll just start going through the questions that are in the chat as well, because many of them have actually sent it to me directly. So someone has asked how to annotate. So now on your exam paper, when you get the text, right, just take your pencil, start underlining keywords that stand out to you. Underline statements that are made that you feel like connect to the guiding question, or when you feel like there's been a metaphor used, there's been a simile used, there's symbolism here. Just draw an arrow next to that and just write metaphor used here, simile used here. If there's ever an anaphora used, anything like that, just ensure that you're always highlighting it. That's a very good way to annotate. Then, one second. What is peel? So peel is it's a method of analysis that a lot of students use, and this is something I think that's especially suggested in the MYP. So peel is point, evidence, explain, link. So you make a point, you make a claim that for example, this text aims to convince women. Just, this is very random, okay, but convince women to buy. It's supposed as an advertisement. So convince women to buy this handbag. That's a point you're making. What's the evidence? Maybe, well, first of all, obviously the text type, but then the other evidence would also be maybe certain statements used in the advertisement. Then explain. So how are these statements helping make that point that you have just, the claim that you've just made? How is this evidence helping make it? And then link it back to your guiding question, right? So how is this maybe helping the author convey their message? How is this helping the publishing house convey their message? That's basically peel. It's point, evidence, explain, link. Isn't it advisable to add a short 2-sentence summary of both text in the introduction of paper 2? Yeah, you should. You should just talk about, for example, Things Fall Apart. So Things Fall Apart, written by Chinua Achebe in, I think it was 1974. And why he wrote it. He wrote it in response to James Conrad's Heart of Darkness, which criticized Nigerian culture. So just little 2-3 sentence introduction per text. And I think this is a good time for you to just show the examiner that you know the context of production. Is there a word bank for literary devices and language? I'm not sure if there's a word bank. Perhaps you could, you could create one for yourself, but I'll try and look if there is a word bank, or if Ms. Sneha knows of a word bank, then maybe she could suggest.
Word bank is best that you create. You have a vocabulary bank for all the text type. That's the best way to do it, because you're more involved. You then your annotation also gets strengthened. The more the conventions or the functional vocabulary that the text demands, if you make a list of it on your own, that is the best way to do it. I think that you should do that.
Yeah. How can we write good thesis statements and topic sentences? So good thesis statements will always have what exactly you plan on covering in your essay, and what you plan on covering should always be relevant to your guiding question, right? So good thesis statements means that you are able to identify what you need to write.
Can I just add here, Sanjana? Yeah,
yes,
good thesis statement, adding to Sanjana's points also, good thesis statement should also chalk out solid 3 to 4 textual features or broader authorial choices or non-literary elements, of course, in relation to the questions that you would explore in your essay. So your thesis statement, it's like an index It's like a window to the
Yes.
essay that
Yeah.
you would write. Yeah.
Yeah. How can we write a good, sorry, and also how to write good topic sentence. So topic sentence is kind of like an introduction to the rest of your paragraph. They should be concise. They shouldn't be too long. It's not like you should write 3-4 lines worth of topic sentences. It should be very concise, intro to your paragraph. In very short, you should explain what you plan on covering. Okay, if your big idea and then the literary elements that you wish to explore the big idea with, that should be a thesis statement. How can we write a good hook? I think Ms. Sneha
I
can
have
answer
answered.
this.
I have answered this. I've directly DM'd with this to Sanvi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there, I think these are messages directed towards me, but I'm just going to answer them. Is there any essay structure / examples for paper 1 and 2 you can refer us to? IB English guys on their website have very good examples of essay structure you can follow. There's no structure given by the IB. I know that the IGCSE exams, they give you a specific structure for these compare and contrast exams, but the IB does not do that. No specific structure you should follow. It should only be, obviously it should be logical and it should be cohesive. So visit IB English Guys website. They have these specific structures. How do you decide on what to write in certain paragraphs? Or sometimes you stress and you're unsure on what to include if you can't find enough devices. I think this is where the plan comes in. If you spend the first 10 to 15 minutes planning, you will not have this problem. Okay, because you also let the nerves settle and you've let the text soak in. And so you know, okay, this is what I have in hand. What can I do with it? What are the big ideas I can identify? Okay, for paper 1, just 3 to 4 big ideas are enough. Base your body paragraphs off of them, and then use the textual features, the literary devices to support these big ideas and support your claims. And there's another one. Can you suggest an example of a thesis statement? Ms. Sneha, do you think you could take this one? The student wants an example of a thesis statement.
Okay. Let's say for paper 1, if it's if the guiding question, it's a print advertisement, how does the text employ, if it's, let's say the guiding question is this, how does the text employ textual and visual elements to persuade the readers to take action, something like this. So that means the question is asking you to analyze the text on 2 grounds. One is textual and one is visual elements. So in your thesis statements, through the strategic use of or utilization of, let's say, color, list it in your thesis statement, list certain devices, if not all of them, but list certain devices. Through the strategic use of color, foreground, gaze, rhetoric, strong imagery, the author aids in conveying an idea and urging the audience to take an action against the cruelty towards animal. So you put it, so what you have done in the thesis statement is, A, you have listed the devices as per the GQ, and also what the question was demanding, how these elements were used for a particular effect. You have explicitly mentioned the effect also. That means in your thesis statement, you've shown the examiner that I've understood the literal meaning of the text, which is that the text is imploring the audience to rise to the action, rise to the scenario, and take certain action against this heinous crime of cruelty against animals. So put it there. That's how you draft your thesis statement.
And just another thing I can maybe add is, again, IB English guys on their website, they have very good examples of thesis statement, and they really break it down for you. So that's a good resource for thesis statements.
Yes, Shreya just added. So we will have to explain those. Definitely, Shreya, you would have 100%. To explain those ideas in your essays. As I said, thesis statement is just like an index. It's just like, we would definitely want to read the book, right? It is just the window. We would definitely want to get inside and explore the entire place. Okay.
Yeah. So Shreya, you don't mention any devices, that don't mention it in your thesis statement, but disinclude them from your essay. Only include devices in the thesis statement that you plan on writing about and you plan on using within your analysis. And I think we're done with questions. If you guys don't have any more questions, then what I'm saying is, Shreya, basically, like, don't include, for example, 7 literary elements in your thesis statement, and then you don't actually include them in your essay. So if you've included symbolism, foreshadowing, rhetoric, persuasive devices, if these are 4 literary elements you have included in your thesis statement, these 4 should appear within your essay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and how do you practice for papers 1 and 2 alone? I think just go through the resources that we have that I've listed on the previous slide. IB English guys are a great start. They have a lot of resources which you can use to practice alone. They have checklists that you can always refer to. You can always go through this recording again. I will share the presentation. I'll be sharing the presentation with everybody, along with the recording of the meeting, but that will happen a little bit later, I think. So I think we can end it over here. I would really like to thank Ms. Sneha for the time, effort, and energy that she has given for this webinar today. I think it's helped a lot of students, and it's as Catherine has said, it's really, thank you, Ms. Sneha, and thank you, Mr. Arpit, as well, for collaborating with IB Path for this webinar. I hope you guys have learned something new today. I hope we've helped clarify your doubts. We've helped you understand a little bit more about how to score and what examiners are looking for when they are grading your IB English language and literature papers. If you have any questions, any doubts, you can always reach out. You can always DM us on IB Path. As you know, we try to answer all of you. And if Ms. Neha, you have anything else to add?
No, just enjoy this course. It's not that intimidating and bad as probably it did come across to some of you.
Yeah.
Enjoy the process, and please understand that this is a process. It'll take some time. Yeah, it'll take some time. And be at it, enjoy it. There's a lot of non-literary text types that you can enjoy. Annotation is the heart of the process. Yeah.
Yeah. And don't feel like after this webinar, it's like you're going to get 7s. Like Ms. Neha rightly said, it's a process. Use everything that we have given you, let it soak in, reflect on it, and, take baby steps, try to integrate one thing at a time in your response. And at the end of the year, or at the end of the 2 years, whatever stage you're at, I'm very confident that you'll get there. And Ms. Neha, like Ms. Neha said, just enjoy yourself and don't let the course intimidate you. All right. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing, and I think I will end the meeting. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.